As a parent advocate, I know that families need a lot of information in order to navigate the special education system. This series of advocacy shorts is a collaborative project between ASSA, the State Association of Private Special Ed Schools in New Jersey, and the attorneys at Hinkle, Finkles, and Pryor, who generously donated their time and expertise to help answer some of the more common questions that families have as they try to advocate for their sons or daughters in the special education system. I hope you find them helpful. Ira, I talk to a lot of parents whose kids just aren't ready to graduate when they're seniors, when they're 18. What are the options for those kids as part of transition planning?
Well, Brenda, parents have to understand that the special education laws were written with the presumption that students will receive special education and related services through the age of 21. In Pennsylvania and New Jersey, that means through the end of the school year in which the student turns 21. There's only one circumstance in which a student can be graduated from their special education program before the age of 21, and that's when they've met all the requirements for a regular high school diploma, which means that they've satisfied all the credit requirements, all the curricular requirements, they've passed all the standardized tests, which is the HSPA in New Jersey or the PSSA in Pennsylvania, and sometimes it's very appropriate that a student not remain in school through the age of 21, but students who haven't satisfied all of the regular criteria for graduation are entitled to remain in school through the age of 21.
So what if a student's got good grades and has passed all of their test scores and earned all their credits? Should they be graduating even if there's still IEP goals to be met?
Well, Brenda, that's something that needs to be considered well before the student reaches the age of graduation. It's one of the requirements of the special education law that graduation issues be considered as part of the transition planning process, for example. If a student is not going to meet the regular criteria that are applicable to non-disabled students, then alternative proficiencies need to be provided. Typically, courts have interpreted that to mean that the goals and objectives of the student's IEP are those alternative requirements, so that if the student's IEP requires not only academic coursework, but also social skills, behavioral skills, emotional functioning, physical functioning, if those things are addressed in the IEP, then typically it's not until all of those goals and objectives are mastered also that the student can be graduated.
Right. What about kids who've been part of their class, up through 12th grade, who now want to participate in the graduation ceremony, but who still need services through 21? What are some options for them?
Well, Brenda, when I first started practicing, that was a very difficult question to answer, and we had to go to court frequently to argue with judges or hearing officers that students had the right to participate in graduation activities, even though they may not be actually graduating and leaving services. But now it's become very clear in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey that students with disabilities are entitled to participate in graduation activities, which means that they can walk down the aisle with their class, they can go to the prom, they can do all the things that the typical students who are actually graduating can do. The key difference is that when they go up on the podium, instead of receiving an actual diploma, they receive either a certificate or an empty diploma case, or certainly not a diploma. If they accept an actual diploma, then that's it. Services are over. So parents need to make sure that it's clearly understood that when the student walks in graduation, that the student's not actually graduating, but it is the student's right, and it's an important rite of passage to participate in these types of activities.
So for kids that don't accept a diploma and who continue to receive services 18, 19, 20, 21, what are some of the things that they might do with their day? They're obviously not going to go back to high school if they've walked in the graduation ceremony. What are some things that they could be doing?
That's a very good point, Brenda, that we don't want students continually repeating 12th grade. That certainly wouldn't make sense. And those years between the ages of around 18 and 21 when they graduate are excellent opportunities for the student to participate in different types of instruction and receive a different type of education, one that's more based in the real world. For example, if a student may have as a career goal that he or she will go into food service, then those last few years in school could be used with the student being placed into a food service environment, for example, at local hospitals, cafeteria, or a restaurant, or whatever it may be, and receiving services and support in that environment to determine what impediments may exist to the student being successful in that environment, so that when the student graduates, then the student can experience success. The point being that we need to broaden our scope of what we consider to be education and provide students with actual real-world experiences, and those years after quote-unquote 12th grade may be a great opportunity to do that.
So I'm thinking about two different kinds of students. One type of student may be academically very capable of even pursuing higher education, but may not have met all of their IEP goals. What are some things that that student might work on?
It's more and more prevalent that students with disabilities are going on to higher education. That's due to a great extent to the fact that many more institutions of higher learning, colleges, community colleges, universities, are providing greater levels of support for students with disabilities. Students who pass through 12th grade may find it necessary to receive services to prepare them for success in a higher education environment, and it may be appropriate to keep that student in the elementary and secondary education system receiving special education services, perhaps by participating in a local community college program where the student receives support through the high school or through contractual arrangements made by the high school or by the local school district, where the student can actually participate to a limited extent in higher education, but with support. We can troubleshoot, again, figure out where it is that the student's going to have difficulty in a higher education setting. Is it going to be study skills, being able to figure out how to read a syllabus and follow a schedule, being able to understand how to receive additional assistance from a professor or take notes in class or find their way around the library? Whatever it is, those would be very appropriate goals to include in the student's IEP to work on before graduation and before the student moves into the actual higher education world.
And what about for kids whose disabilities might be more significant, kids who are likely to need a lifetime of support? What is the role of the adult service agencies in those 18 to 21 years?
What the special education laws envision is that there would be a transition planning process in which linkages would be made with those agencies that will serve a student after graduation. So, for example, in New Jersey, the Division of Developmental Disabilities; on the Pennsylvania side, what were known as the mental health, mental retardation agencies. And it's very appropriate to have the school district special education staff involving these agencies in the IEP process so that the students can begin to interface with those agencies, get on waiting lists if waiting lists are going to be present and necessary to be navigated before the student can receive services. And in some cases, actually receiving services through those agencies, like a vocational rehabilitation agency, may help arrange a job placement for a student while the student is still in their elementary and secondary education years before graduation, but services are being provided through the vocational rehabilitation services agency.
And I assume through all of this, the parents can't be asked to pay for any of these services, that if they're part of the IEP, they're free.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Brenda. Services always need to be provided at no cost to families.
What should a parent do if the district thinks the student's ready for graduation and the parents disagree?
Brenda, that's a very important issue. If a school district proposes that a student graduation is considered a change in placement, and if the parent files for mediation or a due process hearing within the time required by law, which is 15 days in New Jersey, 10 days in Pennsylvania, then the stay put provision of the IDEA, which my partner Paul Pryor spoke about very eloquently in his video presentation, would come into play. And the stay put provision would require that the student continue to be educated, remain in the educational system, and that his or her IEPs continue to be updated and developed while the parent and the school district are contesting the issue of whether or not the student is or is not ready to graduate. If the parent misses that deadline, it's possible that the student may be graduated and stop receiving services, even though the parent may have a right to go through a due process hearing. If we don't have that stay put right, then the student will effectively be graduated. So it's very important that parents pay attention to those timelines. As soon as they receive any written notice, whether it's a letter, an IEP, whatever it may be, and they indicating that the student will be graduating, if the parents disagree with it, it's imperative that they take very quick action.